so I'm happy to
But
give
this
it
is
away.
also
I'll
something
take one.
the child must be able to read English in order to be able to respond
Thanks.
to this.
But I have
Sure.
one for younger kids I'm going
Okay.
to show you.
Okay.
And then we added this for the credit program. Now, a lot of the credit program facilitators really do like this. Some of them have taken this and they have, so again, it's the ACTFL, interpersonal, intrapersonal. They have taken it and just put it in the language itself, right? Works well in German, Spanish, French, Norwegian, it doesn't work so well in Japanese, Chinese, the kids just couldn't read it. But, I think there is some merit to having credit kids talk about this, like person-to-person communication. I can exchange greetings with people. Well, can you do that or not do that? I can talk to a clerk in a store in order to buy things, right? So generally right now what's happening in our summer programs is that these two things are being used primarily only in the credit program. This might not be used at all. This is most likely being used. So I'll pass these around. I think I have.
These are also online.
They're online, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there had been so much pushback from deans, what did I get in here? Oh, because there had been so much pushback from deans about not liking this in our 1 week program, in our 2 week program, this one, the bigger one here. Last year, I devised a new one. And I'll tell you what the deans did like and what most teachers like is this global self-assessment grid. They really liked this. And this was the thing, if they were using it at all, they were using this. So, person-to-person communication, listening, reading, speaking, writing. That makes it more clear for children, right? And then low, I can exchange greetings, and they could rate themselves along these dots, right? Because I knew that most deans like this, I took this and I made it into a folder. So now, here's the global assessment grid on the back. And the other reason I did this is because this goes home with the kids, and we want to express to parents and teachers that we're serious about learning language. A lot of times people will think, oh, you're just this summer camp, but we're very serious about it. And this says something about that level of seriousness, right? And then I took the things from in here that were the top 10 ways you can build your ability to understand and use the language during your stay at the village this summer. So asking and responding to questions, expressing feelings and emotions, I put that in there. What's happening with this generally now is it has to be revamped. Some deans wanted some things changed, so I'm going to be changing it. Then there's this folder here. So the things that the children are creating at the village, generally in the language, now go into this folder. And guess what? It all goes home with them. And it's their portfolio, right? And it just works. This was too cumbersome. And it created hard feelings. And who wants to deal with hard feelings, right? So the other thing...
but this is still self-assessment.
This
right?
is still self-assessment. But if a counselor... the credit villagers actually are starting to use this too. And then, of course, their counselors' assessments and their tests and everything can go in there.
That's nice to self-assessment and the counselor assessment is kind of like
and let me
compare between those two assessments, how the kid sees himself.
Yeah, but again, for older kids.
For older kids. Okay, so
You're getting
because we have younger children and we wanted to find a way for them to self-assess as well, we developed this little simple thing, and those are just the names of the villages. All the names of the villages mean lake in the woods, except for El Waja, which means the oasis, and Mare Floresta, which means sea and woods, because of 2 reasons. It would have been the same in Spanish for Portuguese, and the Portuguese were such great sailors, we thought we should bring the sea in there. Okay, so we created all these little islands. Now, this is an idea for you, and it's an incomplete idea, because we've lost the stickers for this. The deans actually like this, but I don't know, my colleague who's in charge of producing this somehow dropped the ball and didn't produce them this year. But there were a bunch of stickers that went with this that were I can statements, and the kids love this. So I can say my name in Hebrew, and then they'd stick a sticker here on this island. It didn't matter how they put that. I can count to 10. This was another iteration of it where they could write in themselves these are stickers, and then it went on this sort of big globe piece. And if you look, this kind of matches this right here, and then they could write what they can do there, or draw a picture of what they can do there and put it here. So again, this might be for a little, you can pass these around too, this might be for a
Have you
little
seen
older.
the idea of islands somewhere where there is more water and less islands, and
Oh, yeah.
as they learn the language more, there is more land. So because they're beginning to connect more and they're able to do more. I've seen it somewhere. I can't remember, like online, somebody.
Okay, so now, we also do a counselor assessment. Again, in the credit program is a different animal, and the credit program, the kids are being assessed in all kinds of different ways all the time. But for every child who comes to stay with us for 2 weeks, the parents get 3 forms of communications. Well, actually 4. They get a welcoming letter from the dean before they arrive. They get a mid-session dean's letter that says, sort of sums up the session. And then they get a mid-session progress report from the counselor, and then they get a final progress report from the counselor. And I'm just gonna pass out several different ones that you can see. This is what's sent to the parent. Sometimes they're really specific about language, and sometimes they're much more specific about community development. This is Waldse, this is German. Now keep in mind that these could all be quite different. So there's German coming
How are they
around
building that progress report? Are they like asking specific questions, or is it just their feeling? How are you?
We generally have 2 counselors do them, and so one will be the house counselor, who will the cabin counselor, who might be asking questions more like adaptability to the environment, relationships with other villagers, and then the other is their lead language instructor, the person who's teaching their proficiency level. And you'll see this on this is Portuguese coming around here. So you'll see up here what the language counselor will be filling in, and you'll see down here what the house counselor will be filling in.
But it's not like they're sitting with each kid and sort of marking, asking them specific directed questions or whatever, and getting it's.
Well, keep in mind we're working with a 1-to-5 ratio, so they're getting pretty, and this is after the end of a week, so they're getting really familiar.
But informal.
It's informal. It's informal. Yes, it's definitely informal. Okay, so then that's 2 examples there.
Can I ask you a question
Oh,
about your own goals? The village's goals as far as number of hours and a level of, proficiency. Do you have any?
Well, because everyone comes in at a different level, but I can tell you, because we don't do a lot of formal assessment of 2-week villagers, I could tell you with credit, our goal is to move them 1 grade level, so they can skip a grade with credit. With the 2-week program, it's very different, but I do know that we've done a couple of military programs, and in general, the military people are pretty serious. They do the OPI and then the OPI, and
they get money for it. They get a lot of money for it.
I know, but even in a 1-week program, they wanted to assess our program, and we had soldiers who were going to Africa, and so we were doing French with them, and they moved ahead 2 levels on the OPI. So that was quite good.
So, but with the little ones, not necessarily. It's more.
We're just not tracking that data well enough for me to answer that question.
No, it's very important for us to know that.
Yeah.
Because it's an expectation in our case, and we wanted to know. If we're trying to compare things with how you do things, we're learning a lot, and what makes sense, what is helpful, what's doable. And
we have a lot of funders too who want to know that, and generally we find that they're very satisfied with a couple different ways we can get at it. One is if we have a child who's received a scholarship from a private donor or funder, we generally ask the child to write a little bit about what they learned over the summer, and this really hits those funders hard. I mean, they love getting those letters. We don't generally make these kinds of things available to funders because there would be privacy issues there, right?
No, in general,
Yeah.
not specific to a child, but
in general we summarize them, and then we send them, and we can say, so we have Omran out of Chicago, who funds a lot of scholarships for Japanese. And oftentimes we will do a conglomerate of all the kids who receive Japanese funding and talk about the counselor's assessment of how they progressed, using only their first names or their village names, no last names. So that's another thing that we've done.
But it's just the progress report, which is not a formal assessment.
Well, in that case, if the funder really wants that, we can do a little bit more tracking and say that, you know, this child arrived not knowing a word of Japanese, now can write hiragana, katakana, was very, you know, we would have placed them at, you know, novice, whatever, low plus or something by the time they left after 1 week.
And do you sort of assess even informally the children as they come in?
We do. When they arrive, they are assessed several ways so we can get their level. So the first might be sort of at the customs station when they're greeted, and the next might be when they go to the bank. The next might be by their cabin counselor. They don't know they're being assessed.
Do you keep tabs on that?
We do.
Like,
The reason we keep tabs on that is because all the counselors are instructed to keep tabs on that. They come to the next staff meeting and they'll say, you know, maybe now 4 different counselors will have interacted with that child, and they'll all say, I think he's about level 1.5.
Okay.
You know, and then they can agree on that. Now, we continue to watch them the next day to make sure, because some kids are so nervous
Right.
when they come, right? So, and we'll make adjustments if we need to. Yeah. All right, here's Spanish, and this was 2 different Spanish villages. We have 3 Spanish villages, so only one of them is culturally authentic. And then I'm going to pass out, and I know this is a lot of paper, but I wanted you to see that
No, it's very
we don't have one. We don't have one system, except for credit. We do. It's a different thing then. Here's Senlin Hu, which is Chinese, and Hulenden, which is Swedish. And then I brought Norwegian. I want you all to meet the head of our Norwegian village. She's amazing. She's a professor of linguistics and, child psychology at the University of Tromsø in Norway. And her return rate every summer is about 85%.
That's amazing.
She's an amazing woman, and she does a lot with peace studies. Actually, she had a visitor about 4 years ago from Jerusalem who, oh my gosh, she's famous in peace studies. I can't think of his name right now. He stayed about 2 weeks with us. Oh, this was like 4 or 5 years ago. I cannot think of his name, but she has done a lot of work with peace studies around the world, and she can just draw out more from children than I have ever seen anyone else do. So she has a really different approach, and her approach is to have the villagers, when they send home a letter, the mid-session progress report, she has the villagers write about themselves one night in the cabin, and then it gets sent home in a letter to the parents. And there's one here, you'll see an example here where it's mostly in Norwegian, mostly in English with some Norwegian, and then you'll see an example here where it's all in Norwegian. So this goes home to the parents, right? So now we have a different situation. Then the counselors take it, the child writes in Norwegian, the counselors take it, and underneath it they translate into English.
Now I'm just curious, because you said, or maybe I misunderstood you, that you're not officially really teaching reading and writing, and yet all of this stuff is sort of like written expression from the kids. So did I misunderstand you?
No, we're not officially teaching it, but it's becoming more and more a bigger part of our program. It really is. Oh, I see what I've done here. There are 3 you can take here, so you have to take 3 pieces. They're not collated. So take 3 off the top, and then, okay. So if you're looking at French, German, Spanish, Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, Finnish, it's alphabets, right? So the kids are.
So it's like inventive spelling, kind of.
Yeah. We're not correcting spelling or anything like that. If you're looking at the other languages, we sometimes directly and overtly teach them because the kids want that and because it's a significant cultural part of the language. So you have 3 examples of how they do villager assessment there. But again, this is not hard data collection. It's much more villager assessment, and then the counselors assessment from having worked with the child closely for a week at a time.
So I'm going back to the question of that more formal sense of goals. How do you know that you've done a good job?
Well, we do that in several ways. At the end of every session, and again, this is not going to really work for you, some of it's not, we do a villager survey. And they have about 30 questions they answer before they go home for the summer. And it's about how much language they felt they learned, how comfortable they were, did they feel safe at the villages. And then we also do a parent survey. And we're using the feedback from those two on our 2-week program and 1-week program to assess how well we're doing. It's not telling us necessarily a lot about the language. And we've gone back and forth about this. Do we want to get more focused on assessing the 2-week and the 1-week program? And the answer we keep coming up with is no, that's not our goal in the 2-week program. We assess very carefully in the credit program because we have to translate that to the rest of the country. In the 2-week program, what we're really trying to do is help children become citizens of the world and help ignite their passion for learning language.
So what would, what would be your intuitive sense if you were now looking at our program, which is 8 weeks, it's not 2 weeks, with very young, starting now with very young, but eventually, we'll have older kids. Would you then, if you were working in this program, would you want a more solid, formal, results, data, or not necessarily?
Well, I think
Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, you're not. I don't feel.
I
I think this is a huge question in education, right? And the more we work with funders, the more it becomes. Okay, I think I would want to do 2 things. One is I'm totally committed and believe in the value of reflection, even if it's done in a different way. If you don't want to interrupt the flow of Hebrew in the classroom, some way that involves the parent helping you with the child reflecting on the day, I would somehow try to put that in because I think it helps kids become better learners, even little kids. The older they get, I think the more important it is, but it's something I would experiment with if I were you. Secondly, maybe until you get really established, you might want to do some more formal data collection and get an assessment, not where you're doing, when Ailey said to me something about OPIs, I was like, oh God, no, don't do that. Because that's intimidating for children, right? And
and for the counselors.
And for the counselors, because in some way it could be a judgment on how well they're doing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But just doing some more observational data, and even if that meant, maybe one of the things you do is you ask for some funding for someone to come in and be a cultural observer and just sort of, so the counselor's not doing it now. It's hard for a counselor to teach and assess at the same time, right? I think they can do these kinds of things we're doing, where we're saying generally, I think your child is participating and really using the language. That's not hard to do. But if you really want some hard data and you want to use like some can-do statements or what you started with here, Nava, I'd hire someone independently to come in and observe and try to track progress that way, if that's really important to you. And maybe in the early years of your program, it is important because you want to keep this program and you want to keep funding. The language villages grew pretty organically, and after 55 years, we have a reputation, and not too many people challenge us on anything. But if that's a concern for you, then I think it wouldn't be a bad thing to do as long as it's not intrusive, as long as it's not making people feel like they're being watched. And we've had a lot of people come in over the years to do studies with us, and they're doing that. They're tracking, that. We've never been really good at collecting all those PhD theses back again and putting them on our website. It's something we're trying to do now. Does that answer it partway?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It still leaves the question, but I really appreciate your take on it because it gives us a sense of where we are in our
If you think about how children are being assessed in preschools, and they are, right? All the little preschools
That's
send
also,
things.
by the way, a huge question.
Yeah, I know.
And in terms of its appropriateness. And
I
in terms
know,
of,
but they do send something home, but they're not necessarily assessing really hard cognitive skills, right? They're more like
they're assessing the language and stuff, but like you said, a kid can be frozen because, so are you getting an accurate read or not? You know, it's.
Or
Look,
one
it's- the
bad
whole question
day.
of testing is
I know.
a huge question altogether.
I know. So, you know, could you do something like this with an outside observer?
Oh,
I
okay.
think you could. And if your funder requires that.
Not to worry. לא שמעתי, אבל גם אני לא...
What's all your take?